Isaiah 40 is essentially a response to this question, this challenge. The person who says, my way is hidden from the Lord, Isaiah is talking about how to understand God in relationship to our world and my world in relationship to God in a way that actually will honor God, but actually make life possible. So Isaiah 40 starts with very good news. If you were here last week, the sermon was about a disappointing turn. And the point was, any human is going to disappoint you. Even the best of humans is going to be disappointing. And Hezekiah was about the best. At least after King David, Hezekiah was about the best king that they had. But even he came to a disappointing end. And so that's Isaiah 39. And then suddenly chapter 40 says, comfort my people, says your God. If Hezekiah was a disappointment, if your good king was a disappointment, find comfort in these words. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem. Proclaim to her that her hard service has been completed. Her sin has been paid for. She has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. It's a picture of God's people who have been punished by God because of their sin. They will be in exile, but their exile is going to end, and they will be returned to the land. And these are the comforting words. The sin that caused this punishment now is gone. At the end of verse 2 it says, she's received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. And when you're reading that, you ought to... that ought to make you stop and think, double for all their sins. That doesn't seem fair. Did God really punish them twice as much as they deserved? Probably the idea there is just a poetic language by saying double for all their sins. It's simply a way of saying the price has been fully paid. Okay, it's just a way of saying it's complete. The atonement for the sin is accomplished, it's done. The sin is wiped out. Okay, there's no more payment for sin that Israel has to give. It's been fully paid for. One commentator, though, said that word double has a root word that has the idea of like when you double a piece of paper, you fold it over. Right now you have two sides, you make it like this, now you have 4 pages, you double it by folding it over. And the idea is that the punishment perfectly corresponds to the sin. So it's just a way of saying that, you have paid for the sin and that's it. Not more, not less. And so that might be the image that Isaiah is dealing with there, but it's simply a way of saying God is no longer going to treat you according to your sin. Your sin has been put behind. God has put your sin behind him, and that's in your past. And your relationship with God no longer depends, or no longer is focused on your sin. That's been removed as a barrier. Then in verse 3, a voice of one calling, in the desert prepare the way for the Lord. Make straight in the wilderness a highway for our God. Every valley shall be raised up, every mountain and hill made low. The rough ground shall become level, the rugged places plain, and the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all mankind together will see it. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken. So Isaiah 40 starts off very positively, and it's a picture of the people being returned from exile. I mean, that's that image of, make the road plain and level the mountains. And so nothing is going to hinder God coming to his people and bringing his people out of exile. They're going to arrive without fail. They're going to travel without difficulty. Nothing is going to delay this. When God brings his people back, there will be nothing to hinder it. That's the point of those words. Of course, if you're familiar with the New Testament, these words are applied to John the Baptist. For the coming of Jesus, the final fulfillment of these verses is coming about. It starts off, Isaiah 40, very, very positively. But it's like at this point, we need to draw a line, and in the flow of Isaiah 40, we're going to be going up and down and up and down. That might not seem very logical, but if we can try to pay attention to what's going on, I hope it's going to make sense. Verse 5 says, all mankind or all flesh will see it together. Then in verse 6 it says, the voice says, cry out. And I said, what shall I cry? And then here's the message. All men, all flesh are like grass. Same image, all flesh, but at first that was positive. All flesh will see the glory of the Lord. Now it's all flesh, all humans are just like grass. All their glory is like the flowers of the field. The grass withers, the flowers fall, because the breath of the Lord blows on them. Surely the people are grass. The grass withers, the flowers fall, but the word of our God stands forever. So now it's this, if we want to divide the chapter into positive and negative, now we have this negative image of, these are humans. This is kind of back to this disappointment. We're like grass that doesn't last. How many of you still have a Christmas tree in your house? Okay, not too many of you. You guys didn't toss it out the window again, did you? Like you did in the past. That's good. So you can ask them their story about,
everyone's safe.
How they dispose of a Christmas. Yeah, no one has them anymore. Ours is in the back, waiting for nicer weather, just to be burned up in the pit. And yeah, your Christmas tree might have been very, very beautiful and very alive. But it's not anymore. It's gone. That's why you took it out of your house. But this is us. At Christmas time we might look great and green and have lights on, but just wait a little bit and it's all going to fade. If it came to our yard, 5-6 years ago, our backyard was really, really beautiful. Basma's mom did a lot of work. Now it's just pretty much thrash. Weeds everywhere. There's some kind of mole who keeps making holes, and I don't know what to do about that stupid little creature in our yard. And it really doesn't look so good anymore. That's just what happens naturally. So we have this turn, suddenly very positive. All flesh will see the glory of the Lord, but yeah, all flesh is also like grass and flowers that wither and die. And that's the end. But that little part, 6 to 8, does end with the word of the Lord will last forever. And that's actually a transition to the next part, verses 9 to 11. It doesn't use the word, but this is the word. This is the announcement. You who bring good tidings to Zion, go up on a high mountain, you who bring good tidings to Jerusalem. Lift up your voice with a shout. Lift it up. Don't be afraid. Say to the towns of Judah, here is your God. Keep that phrase in your mind. Here is your God. Here is your God. The word there in the Greek translation of the Old Testament is gospel. This is the gospel, the announcement. Here is your God. There is a king. You have a ruler. It's not Hezekiah. It's not Sennacherib. It's not the Babylonian king, Esarhaddon, and all of those guys. It's not David. It's not Hezekiah. You actually have a king, a better kind of king. And this is the announcement of the good news. Someone rules. Someone actually rules. See, the sovereign Lord comes with power. His arm rules for him. Look, his reward is with him. His recompense accompanies him. Your God is the one who is the sovereign ruler of the universe. He's the king. So we have this image of an extremely powerful ruler. Yeah, that's a common image. All through history, rulers have wanted to present themselves, how powerful they are. And they march their huge army, whether it's through the streets of Rome, or through the streets of Berlin, or through the streets of Moscow. You have this big army to announce, look how powerful we are. So you have this image of power, and we're all familiar with that. If you read history, we have that familiar picture of the powerful ruler. But what's cool and what's part of the good news is the next thing that's said about the sovereign Lord who is our king. He tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs in his arms, carries them close to his heart. He gently leads those who have young. So he's like a shepherd, not just powerful, but caring. One who comes close, who knows his sheep individually. He knows the weak ones, the ones that are young, who need extra care. The new mothers that have the little lambs running with them. He sees that, and he takes care of them differently because he knows their individual circumstances. He's also that kind of ruler. He is the sovereign Lord, and he's a shepherd who comes close. This is the good news. This is the gospel, that's the kind of ruler who is offered to us. They're the same person. The sovereign Lord who is the shepherd. This is our God. The next part of the text keeps us above the line. We're still on kind of the positive plane of Isaiah 40. Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, or with the breadth of his hand marked off the heavens? Who has held the dust of the earth in a basket, or weighed the mountains on the scales and the hills in a balance? Who has understood the mind of the Lord, or instructed him as his counselor? Whom did the Lord consult to enlighten him? Who taught him the right way? Who was it that taught him knowledge, or showed him the path of understanding? So here the image of everything was created by God, from the lowest to the highest, from dust, to the entire cosmos and the mountains and everything in between. He is the source of all of it. He is above all of it. He is in control of all of it. All of it is within his hands, from the smallest to the biggest. And he didn't need any help. He didn't need help. Who could possibly have helped him? Who could have advised him? What group of people did he need to sit down with? With Communitas, from the very beginning of this church, we had a team working together, and this would have never happened, Communitas, if there hadn't been a team, because I could never have done this by myself. Okay? Literally, before we started, my question is there a team? Because I need help. I can't accomplish anything by myself. God can. He doesn't need counsel. He doesn't need advice. He's got all the wisdom that he needs, all the power that he needs. He doesn't need anyone. He doesn't need us. If he loves us, if he cares for us, it's not out of his need. If he loves us and cares for us, it's just because of the amazing God he is, but not because he needs us. He doesn't need us. But then we have, again, a turn to the lower part of the line. In comparison, surely the nations are like a drop in a bucket. They're regarded as dust on the scales. Of course, now, scientific instruments can actually measure the weight of dust. But, thinking, 2,500 years ago, no one measured dust back then. No one had any idea how much dust weighed. It had no significance on scales back then. The nations are just like that. They have no significance when God is weighing things. He weighs the islands as though they were fine dust. Lebanon is not sufficient for altar fires, nor is animals enough for burnt offerings. God doesn't need our worship. Lebanon was known for its forest, so all the wood you needed for a fire, Lebanon could provide. And all the animals of Lebanon or anywhere, God doesn't need it. God doesn't need our sacrifice. God doesn't need our worship. He's not going to fall over in a faint without us, without our worship. So Isaiah is just reminding us of our place in relationship to God. So it says, before him all the nations are as nothing. They are regarded by him as worthless and less than nothing. A lot of the translations of that verse are probably unclear. The idea is not God doesn't care, that God doesn't see, God doesn't regard. He's not saying you're so worthless that God doesn't. The point is, in comparison to God, the nations are nothing. If you put God and all the nations side by side, they weigh nothing. You know, the God side goes up, or no, the other way, it goes down. You know, God has the weight, the substance, and the nations amount to nothing in comparison to God. And verse 21. In fact, 21 to 26 all kind of come as a package, as a unit. Do you not know? Have you not heard? Has it not been told you from the beginning? Have you not understood since the earth was founded? He sits above the circle of the earth. The people are like grasshoppers. He stretches out the heavens like a canopy and spreads them out like a tent to live in. And again, it's this picture of God as the creator of everything that is. And this is why he's the sovereign Lord, because he is the creator of it. But then he brings princes to naught, to nothing. He reduces the rulers of the world to nothing. No sooner are they planted, no sooner are they sown, no sooner do they take root in the ground, but he blows on them and they wither. And the whirlwind sweeps them away like chaff. God rules because he's the creator, and all those other rulers do not truly rule. We might think we're in charge. We've got a handle on our life and we can do it. But Isaiah is simply reminding us that's not actually who we are. God is the ruler. But then another way in which God shows his rulership. To whom will you compare me? Who is my equal, says the Holy One. Lift your eyes and look to the heavens. Who created all these? Who brings out the starry hosts one by one and calls them by name? Because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing. We might get the feel for this verse a little bit more if we can kind of, project ourselves back into the worldview that many had a couple thousand years ago. This isn't just a scientific statement about God creating the stars. It's not just about astronomy, but in the sense it's about astrology. For many people, like in the Babylonian kingdoms, stars were like gods. You would read the stars, and stars would give you wisdom. And so by saying God rules over them, it's simply to say, don't look at the stars. They're not really gods. They don't have a voice. God gives them voice. God calls them by name. If they have any existence, it's because of God. Why look to the stars? They're not your source of wisdom. They don't have a word for you. Look to God alone. So that's that image about the stars again. It's, not just thinking science. I mean, that's pretty incredible enough that, God is in command of the stars and the gases and how those operate and so forth. But if you imagine them as some kind of gods, it's still the same point. They are nothing in comparison to God. They have no rule. They have no voice. They have no significance. Don't look to anything else. And then with that, we come to this complaint in verse 27. My way is hidden from the Lord. My cause is disregarded by my God. And that complaint comes because of these two sides of this line, because it's still not necessarily clear how to put those together. How do they relate to one another? I mean, we can get the fact of how great God is. God alone can, God alone exists, and he rules. And we can get our human weakness, hopefully. We might struggle with that, wanting to make ourselves more significant. But how do these two relate? And pretty much every worldview from the dawn of mankind is struggled with the relationship between these two worlds and come to different answers. So some pretty much there is no God up here. This is just, the relationship between God and the world is God is in everything. Which is not such good news in my mind. Like some New Age people, I remember a number of years ago when I was younger, some celebrity saying, I'm God. We're all God and I'm God. And all I could think is, man, that's not good news. Seriously, if everything is God, then, every evil thing that happens, that's God. And what good news is that? What hope is there in that? If just everything is God, if we just bring God down here, then whatever else, it doesn't sound like much good news to me. Of course, other worldviews have this huge separation. It's like this kind of wall between us and God, an impenetrable barrier. A couple hundred years ago, for many people in Europe and America, they believed in God, but the worldview was basically God created it, created to run a certain way, and now God has just kind of backed out of the world, and he's no longer involved in the world. He might or might not see, but there's not much use in praying because God isn't going to do anything. Because now he did his work, he got it started, now he's just out. Or it might just be he just doesn't care. Maybe he's involved in the world, but he's involved in the world just for himself and for his own benefit, and he doesn't care about what's going on here and what we are. It doesn't matter to him. We are truly insignificant to him, and God is just doing his thing, and all we can do is submit or not submit. It's not going to make much difference either way. But almost every worldview has some kind of an answer to the question of the relationship between, God and us. How close are we, or how distant, and how do we relate? And that's a question that Isaiah 40 is wrestling with, and even, God's people have this complaint. My way is hidden from God for whatever reason. Maybe it's because I'm not worthy, although I thought it wasn't so bad, but maybe it's my fault, but my way is hidden from God, and he's not involved. Look at the circumstances of my life. Where is God in this picture? So there's this tension between these two sides, and theologians have terms for talking about this, and I actually created this all very complicated other slide I put in the presentation, and then I thought, that's probably going to be a waste of time. So I eliminated a nice theological lecture, so you can thank me for doing that. But the point is simply, this is a discussion, a debate that people have had, whether theologians or just a common person, and in all cultures and times. How does God relate to us? And is he involved with us? And this is how Isaiah resolves this. Why do you say, Jacob, and complain, Israel? There's a lot of richness in why he chooses those words. If you know the Old Testament story, Jacob and Israel were the same person. He was given the name Jacob. He wasn't such a good person. He deceived, his parents, and he had to run away to his relatives. His name means deceiver. But in spite of being who he was, Jacob, the deceiver, God met with him and wrestled with him and gave him a new name, Israel. Jacob, Israel, the one that God chose, the deceiver, the guy running away. This is the one. This is us. We're Jacob. Don't you know? Haven't you heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary. Young men stumble and fall. Even people who are in great shape. Everyone has a breaking point. You know, an Olympic athlete, if you just keep pushing and pushing, he's going to break down. A well-trained soldier eventually is going to break down. He just can't keep going forever and ever. You know, even the strongest among us have a breaking point. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. And so the flow of Isaiah 40 is, yeah, we have to move through what's below this line. But because our God is like this, it has this kind of power, He can come to our level and to bring us up. And this line is not an impenetrable barrier. It's not a line that stops God. God can move through that line. He can move down to our level and He can bring us up. And pretty much the rest of Isaiah, you might say, is sort of the mechanics of how that can happen. How this can become this. How we can actually move up there. We've got to keep both sides of the line. We can't just bring God down to here. We can't make God just like us. He can't just be a human. You know, I mean, you think about the Greek gods or Northern European gods, you know, and there's all these different gods, and they're mainly like extra powerful humans, you know, but they're pretty miserable creeps. You know what I'm saying? You know, they're having sex all over the place, and they're starting wars, and you know, they're basically human gods. You know, it's bringing God down here to our level and creating God in our image. Or, you know, other worldviews, you know, even many of the Greek philosophers realize, yeah, that's silly, you know, we can't bring God down to our level. There is one kind of God who's kind of way up there, the unmoved mover, who isn't involved in our life. But that's a very Greek view of God, the unmoved mover. That is just up there and distant and not really involved in our life. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is not an unmoved mover. The God of David was not someone distant and silent and just kind of up there. The God of Isaiah, that wasn't Isaiah's God, who was just way up there and separated from us. The God that Jesus called Abba Father is not that kind of Greek view of God. And so most worldviews go too far one way or too far the other way. And I'm not sure, you know, some of you might know more about other religions and worldviews. I'm not sure I can think of any other God like this, who can somehow operate on both sides of the line, who can be who He is, incomparable and without need of us or anything, and yet is willing to operate down here as well and bring us up. I found this image. It struck me because at the end of Isaiah 40, there's this image that a lot of people really like of rising on wings of eagles. You know, and the image for Isaiah is, you know, we have, you know, we get these eagle's wings and we get to fly, but you might find it very hard to think that's you. Like, you might not be able to picture yourself like an eagle. Okay? So this is pretty cool. You know, you can be this crow. And some photographer was at the right place and right time, and he took these pictures of this crow who, you know, kind of aviary Uber. You know, he got a ride on the eagle, you know. So you can do that. You can be that. We can be that. We can be that little black crow who just, you know, finds someone who can carry us. There is someone who can carry us. There's two amazing verses in the Old Testament. Yeah, and we're operating with this line and how to keep both worlds in mind at once. Psalm 113. The Lord is exalted over the nations, his glory above the heavens. Who is like the Lord our God, the one who sits enthroned on high, who stoops down to look on the heavens and the earth? One translation says, who humbles himself. He raises the poor from the dust. The one who is exalted over the nations and above the heavens. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap. He seats them with the princes of their people. He settles the barren woman in her home as a happy mother of children. This is our God. I don't know of another God like that. I don't know of another religion or worldview that has this picture of God, a God like this. One extreme or another, or something bizarre, it's not such good news. I can't think of another God like this. This is our God. This is our God. And in Isaiah, in all their distress, he too was distressed. In all their distress, he too was distressed. That's amazing. It's unbelievable. Not just that he sees, but he feels with us. It affects him. He's not an unmoved mover. He's not a distant God. The great creator, sovereign of the universe, is moved when we are moved. He is afflicted when we are afflicted. In our distress, he is distressed. This is our God. And the angel of his presence saved them. In love and mercy, he redeemed them. He lifted them up and carried them all the days of old. This God is our God. Isn't that good news? This God is our God. This is the God presented in this book. This is the God that we have. I don't know why anyone would want to choose a different God than this. One of the simple, easy gods is just this or just this, rather than this amazing God, who is who he is eternally. And yet nothing stops him from coming down to us and lifting us up. Not because he needs it for himself, but simply because he's pure love. Pure power and pure love. He's all of it. This God is our God. Father, help us to believe who you are and remind ourselves of who you are and rejoice that you have allowed us to know you and the kind of God that you are. Amen. There's lots of ways to respond to that. Of course, ideally, we need to believe it this week and live it this week. But for now, we're going to sing our response to that. So Toms and Anastasia are coming up. And let these words just be our expression back to God to remind ourselves, this is our God, and sing out of gratitude that this is the God that we are allowed to know.